Alright guys, welcome to another Keyshot tutorial. Today we will be going into the different types of lighting setups that you can use to stage scenes like the one that's shown here. There are multiple ways to light a scene, and the way what we're going to be showing today isn't always the best method, but it is one method that, especially when designing something like a lamp or anything that has a light bulb in it, these are the techniques that I would suggest. Alright, so let's go get right into it. We're just going to go ahead and start with just a new scene here. And what we're going to do is everything we're going to use today is going to be elements that you can add in directly through Keyshot. You won't have to import anything to follow along with me. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add in a backdrop round. This is what I would consider like a bit of a half pipe in a way, or I guess it's a half of a bowl. And in order for us to see this, we're going to need to change the material from ground plane to something like a paint material. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's go into our paint materials and down to textured, and we're just going to use a paint textured white, and you should just be able to drag that into the screen, and it will. I'm just scrolling out here so I can see. Now you'll be able to see exactly what we've created here. Now you'll see that it's quite a bit larger than the environment scene that we are starting with, and that's something that you really want to start paying attention to is, what scale are we working in? So currently, and you can find that by going up to Edit, Set Scene Units, and let's see if I can find out what we are in right now. So say we've modeled our our lamp in millimeters. We want to work in millimeters as well, or if you have a better grasp of how big inches are. So typically in America we have we tend to understand inches or feet better than millimeters. So I'm gonna do that for now. I'm just gonna use inches. And what's saying now is that my scene is going to change one undefined unit to 1 inch. And select OK. The reason we want to understand this is because especially when we're dealing with lumens or watts, which is the intensity measurement for lights, you want to try to keep it as close to real world as possible. So, if I typically, my household, we might use like a 60-watt light bulb. And so for me to drag a 60-watt light bulb into a scene that's proper scale, it's going to look more accurate. But if my scene is much smaller, let's say it's scaled to like the size of like a dollhouse, that 60-watt light bulb is going to be really intense. So keep that in mind when you're starting these Keyshot scenes. Okay, so I'm still going to need to change the size of my environment. So let's say a typical room of a house is maybe, I don't know, let's just pick something generic. So let's see. Well, let's look it up. Standard. I'm just Googling really quick. So I'm just Googling standard room size in inches. So about 10 feet by 10 feet, okay? So I can type in here 10 feet, maybe. No, I can't. So, well, that's pretty easy. 10 times 12, 20 inches. That's a circle. Okay, so now it's time to adjust my backdrop to fit inside my environment. So what I can do now is I can go into backdrop and then my scale. I'm just going to drag that down until it fits inside. I may have to hit the center button here. That might be 0.25. Center. Still, it's a little too big still. Let's go 0.1. There we go. Okay. This will work for now. And the reason we want to do this is we want something for our light to kind of bounce off of, to really get an understanding of the different types of lights and how each light has its own type of reflection, or I'd say it casts a certain way. The second thing we need to do is let's go ahead and drag in. We're going to add a new geometry, which is going to be a sphere. So go to your edit, add geometry, sphere. And we're just going to kind of drag it up. Okay. And you know, that's an okay size. It's a little bit big. I might scale that down to something like 5. There we go. That's a bit big of a light bulb, but it should work for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make pattern here. Because I want to get 4 different cylinders to show off the different types of lighting. So I'm going to be going in my X direction. So I'm typing 4. And this is a pretty cool tool. I don't always use it, but for this kind of demonstration, it's nice. So spacing, I'm going to increase this so they all have kind of their own breathing room here. And hit OK. So once again, to get that is I highlighted the body that I wanted to pattern, right-clicked, and there's a make pattern here that I chose. The second thing I want to do is I want to pick an environment here that is a little bit darker. I want to see more of these lights. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose an indoor environment. Something like, let's go ahead and choose bathroom. Okay. And I'm just going to turn the brightness down. All right. So I just did about half the brightness. And you know, it's okay if you could see the background right now. It's not that big of a deal. I just want something that I can see my lights a little bit better. All right, now let's get right into the various types of lights. So if you go back to your materials folder, you will see a light folder here under the materials. And if I open that up, I get emissive light, or area light, emissive light, IES light, and point light. So your area light is going to be probably the most commonly used option. This is going to send light in 360 degrees around the object that you're assigning the light to. Emissive light is going to be more of like an LED, and that's going to have a pretty. It's going to have a very consistent light color around the entire object. And IES light, and you can open that up as well. That is, it's using similar, this was actually created mainly for like video games, to create very specific types of light rays, without having to create complex geometry to cast that light. So, so imagine you don't have a certain type of shade to project a light a certain direction. This is what they would use in a video game to kind of get like these different types of like hallway lights, you know, and they explain exactly what it's going to do. So if you hover over it, like this is like a flat moon, 300K. So that's going to talk about that 300K represents the color of the light. And some of these have an angle as well. So like this is a 90-degree light. And then we have our point lights. That is going to be more of like a spotlight. And you can kind of choose what direction that gets pointed in. I don't necessarily use point light as often as the others, but we'll be getting to that as well. So let's go ahead and just kind of assign these 4 spheres a different light source. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm just going to choose a lumen neutral here. So for the area light. All right, so that's the first one. And I am going to mess with the settings in a little bit, but I'm just going to go through and assign these. And you'll notice that right away, these lights aren't too intense. They're not, you know, crazy bright. That's because I took the time to make sure that my scene was set up in proper measurements. All right, so the next one, I'm going to do a emissive neutral as well. IES spotlight, I'm going to pick something also with a neutral. Let's do something 45 degrees. Okay, that's wanting to, there we go. Oh. Sometimes it wants to snap to the round behind it. And then, last but not least, I'll do a point light. Oh, and I missed it again. So I'm just hitting Control Z to undo. And I'm just kind of hovering over it a little bit longer. Okay, if you can't drag it to the material, another option is you can just drag it up to the folder on under the scenes. Oh, that's the wrong one. Here we go.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, that's the wrong one too. Sorry about that. Okay. So here we go. This is kind of a brief rundown, and then the last thing we need to do is to really enhance how these lights are affecting the background and the round here, is we want to change our environmental, our lighting scene. So under lighting, we have we have a couple of different presets. Performance mode is going to kind of remove a lot of the quality in order to set up a scene faster. Basic is what it says. It's the startup. It's very basic. And then product is the most common one that I use. That is good for anything with lighting, shadows, and transparent materials. And then interior. I usually use interior for this kind of setup, especially when using the IES light, area light, or the point light. If I'm using emissive light, I can get away with product, but you'll see that you get a lot more realistic projection of light when using interior, and it also renders a bit quicker. And then the third thing that I can do is add in caustics here, and that will caustics is if you ever shine or if you ever see light from a window get cast into like a glass and it leaves behind kind of like a rainbow on the table, that is what's called caustics. So you may or may not need this. Really, what I like to do is I like to turn it on to see if it affects it, if it adds anything. If it doesn't, I turn it off because it does increase the rendering time. All right, so I'm gonna leave it off for now because I don't have any like transparent materials to project the light through. Okay. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my environment to a color and black, just so it's not distracting me. All right, so I'm gonna go one by one through these and just kind of play around with the settings for you to show you, how I would adjust these lights. So while I do that, I'm gonna go in and just kind of turn off the others so they're not interfering. So this first one we have here is our area light diffuse. And the first thing I like to do here is pick the color. And to do that, we can just double click on this color palette, which is set to neutral right now. And I like to, you can choose different color profiles. I always work in Kelvin when choosing a light because that is more accurate to the real world. This is actually specifically designed for real world similarities. So, if you buy a light bulb, it will tell you most often what the color in Kelvin it is. So, you can get more warm color or more cool. So really, I can't tell you which one is better or not. It's really up to you what type of scene you're trying to set. So, warm is always good for kind of a daytime feel, especially if you're, working in, if you want to make like an artificial sun, then you go with something like this, or a heat lamp. So, and then you have these options to apply in front of geometry, back of geometry. And that really depends on the type of object that you're applying this light to. So, normally you leave both those on. But if you have a complex shape that you're applying light to, you can play around with that to see how it affects it. But another way to really see what that does is if I add a plane here, what happens if I copy this material, paste it there, and I'm just double clicking on it to adjust the plane's material. If I uncheck one of those, you can see that on the top of the plane there's light, on the bottom there is not, and vice versa. Okay. Then we have visible to camera. This is pretty neat if you want to create light, if you want to cast light somewhere but you don't want to get in the way of your shot. This is a nice tool to use. Visible in reflections and visible in shadows. That's another thing. It's if there are other light sources coming in the scene, you can decide whether or not your light source is going to be affected by those other light sources. So because I have an environment here with other light coming from the ceiling, my sphere here is casting a shadow as well as projecting its own light. And same thing with the reflection. If this was a glossy surface, you'd be able to see this sphere. I can turn the roughness down here so you can see that. You should be able to see the sphere in the reflections. Yeah, there it is. All right. I'm just going to turn this roughness back up a little bit. Okay. And the last thing I would mess around with is, oh, actually I didn't have that reflection turned off, so let's try that again. There we go. Okay, that's the reflection. So if I uncheck it now, it goes away. If I check it, it appears. All right. 0.1. Okay. All right, and then the other thing you would adjust is just the power itself. So because I have my scene unit set properly, and the size of my scene is in a 1-to-1 scale, meaning real world scale, then I don't have to adjust this. However, if it's not in scale, you will need to tinker with this. Either typically it's lowering it down. I find that I'm lowering it down way often than not. You can see it's, obviously the higher I make it, like 3,000 is like, the way I like to think of it is 3,000 lumens is like a projector, like a little home projector. And if I go to watts, look how much brighter that is. So like 3,000 watts is huge, but 60 watts, that is like a similar to a typical light bulb, or 40 or 30. Watts typically has a lot more intensity to it. So, I like to kind of just drag that until it looks right. All right. Sorry about that background noise, guys. Okay, second one, let's go ahead and mess with our emissive light. All right, what I'm going to do to really highlight this emissive light is I'm going to duplicate it. So I right-clicked and duplicated it. I'm going to scale my duplicate up a little bit, just ever so slightly. And what I'm going to do to this is I'm going to give it a plastic, cloudy, and let me give it, let's see, cloudy texture. Sure. Let's make this. Yeah, sorry. Our AC is pretty loud in here. I'm going to give it a little bit of a color. And what I was just doing here is I'm kind of giving it a, actually, you know what? Sorry, let me go ahead and use a glass solid red. Okay, solid red glass. All right, this is what I'm trying to replicate here is like an LED or like a Christmas bulb or something like that, Christmas light. So typically what happens is they have a white LED and they just put like a piece of plastic that's colored around it. So this would be what I would use specifically for like a tail light of a car, or like a Christmas light or something like that. And then if I modify, let me look into my intensity of my my emissive light. Another thing you can do to really kind of enhance this is I'm going to change it from Kelvin to RGB. Go to my red here. And I want to pick something kind of like a very light pink. Because what there would be in a LED, there's always a little bit of a hot spot. And I'm going to just bump up my intensity. 10. And I'm just messing with my transparency here. Let's see if I change it to just regular glass. There we go. Okay, so I had a glass solid. It wouldn't be glass solid. It would just be regular glass. Refractive though. All right. Let's see, basic. So I'm just playing around with a little different things. So another thing that people ask me a lot is like, okay, how do I get like a light pipe for a product? So typically I do like a frosted color and change that to like the color that they would use. Okay, see how it's like the more deep the red I get, the least amount of kind of color gradient that I get, but the more that I drag it to the kind of like a more pink color, or less saturated color, the more I get this really interesting effect here. You can also mess with the transparency distance to kind of increase that or decrease it. So this is just a fun way to play around with emissive lighting. You can change your intensity down to increase or decrease that hotspot. And it's really about messing around with both the intensity of the emission and also the transparency and color of the light pipe, or whatever case that's around it. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I believe it is our spotlight. Yes. All right, so you may or may not see a little cone here, and the light will be invisible. That's because if I go to my View tab, I have Show Light Source checked, and you can see it also has a hotkey L. So I click that off, it disappears. If I click L, it reappears. And if I double click on this, I have two options. I have multiplier and radius. Now radius will just kind of change the size of the spotlight a little bit. Actually, it looks like it's kind of shifting it. You don't really need to mess with that too much. But then the multiply is really just like, increase or decrease the brightness by a certain percentage. And these will all vary based on what type of IES light you use. So let me go back to IES. Let me pick something a little bit less intense. Let me choose, let's see, single square LED. Oh, let me get back to library or scene folder. I'm going to drag this onto the sphere to change it. And now what's cool about this one is you'll see how it changes the intensity of the center spot versus the outer glow. And this is where I think your radius gets affected the most. Maybe not. But the multiplier does. All right. And then the other thing that you should know is to kind of move where this is projecting, you'll want to use the Move tool, and you can change the direction of this light. Okay? And holding down Shift, I can change in 15-degree increments. So IES is pretty cool. It does take a little bit longer to render, and to master it, it just takes a little bit of time to figure out. But like I said, it takes less time to figure out if you have the right scene set up and the right size of everything. All right, and now we have our last one, point light. Now these are a little bit more tricky. I'm gonna kind of change that to a red. Let me go up to something like 3000. This one seems to be kind of projecting out all across the surface. I think this is better suited for something like a plane. So I'm just creating a plane here. I'm going to copy this material, paste it onto this one. And I'm going to hide this. Yeah, so and then point light is okay, but it seems to have a little bit less freedom to kind of play around with the different the different options than area or IES light does. So let me just go check out my other point lights here. Yeah, so this one just kind of seems to be like the most basic one. You can see that it has if I look at my reflection, it does have more of a beam of light though. But I can get the same kind of effect with my IES spotlights. All right. So that's all you need to really know for now about the different lighting setups. If you feel free to take this knowledge and apply it to your lamps. Play around with the caustics under the lighting here. If you have a glass light bulb that you have around this, around your light, maybe play around with your ray bounces. The lower the ray bounce, the least amount of light gets reflected through glass. But 16 seems to be a pretty good one. And then just remember that you only want to turn on a setting if it's absolutely necessary, because it does increase the rendering time. So, if you say let's turn on our area light here. If I can get away with turning off global illumination, do that. It might reduce the quality, but it will increase the rendering time. Same thing with ground illumination. If it really doesn't add much to the scene, go ahead and just turn it off. Self shadows, same thing. Caustics, same thing. So, all right. I hope that was helpful to you guys. Here's the different my different lights all together. I look forward to kind of seeing what you guys create with your lamp project, and I'll see you next time.